Christine, you want to take it away?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately, my video is not working, so you can't see me, but if you have my voice, I guess that's enough. I wanted to talk to you about what I did with my research. I spent a lot of time researching and collecting information about my ancestors, and I ended up with, boxes and binders and files and flash sticks and all kinds of information. And it was not only my Norwegian genealogy, but also Irish, English, and German. And at a certain point, I thought I really need to pull everything all together into a cohesive format. Because I kept thinking, well, what if I die tomorrow and what's going to happen to all these materials? Because I thought, my kids would come along and say, well, they didn't know what it was all about and they'd throw everything out. So all my work would be in vain. So I decided to use the data that I'd gathered to create a narrative, to package my research in a certain way. So next slide. Okay, so I first had to decide exactly where I was going to start, what I was going to focus in, because I had all different ancestors, descendants. So I decided to focus on my Norwegian great-grandparents. And these were my father's maternal grandparents. So they were going to be the subject of my first narrative. And as I always tell my students, whether you're writing an essay or a research paper, you should start out with an outline. So this was my outline. So volume 1, I was going to focus on what I call the bridge generation. And Jacob and Ronald were the generation that was born in Norway and then came to the United States. So they bridged, it was a bridge between Norway and the US. So that was the first volume. The second volume, I was going to look at the ancestors of Jacob and Ronald. Volume 3, I was going to look at the descendants of Jacob and Ronald in America. And then in the last part, I was going to look at the members of this family that remained in Norway. Next slide. So in the first part, as I said, I was going to focus on Jacob and Ronald, the bridge generation. And in the first chapter of that volume, I looked at the history of Norwegian immigration. And then chapter 2, I focused on the birthplace of Jacob and Ronald, which was in the village of Lum. And then in chapter 3, I was going to focus on Jacob and Ronald and write everything that I knew about the two of them. Next. And then in volume 2, I was going to look at the ancestors of Jacob and Ronald. And, when we're doing research, looking for information on our ancestors, we usually go backwards. We have our grandparents and go back to our grandparents and so on. But I decided to reverse that and start at the beginning and then move to the present. So it was in chronological order. So the first chapter was what I called mythical beginnings, because I can't vouch for the accuracy, the historical accuracy of this information. A lot of it I found on the internet, but it was a path back to my ancestors, but I can't say that it was really historical. So it might be more myth than history. But I thought, even if it's not true, it was interesting. They were good stories. So I wrote that up. So that was generations 36 through 34. Chapter 2 was Denmark. And so I go through these 7 chapters all deal with the historical period. So I wrote first about the history of that particular period, and then I focused on the ancestors themselves. So I went through these various historical periods. Denmark, some of my ancestors were in Denmark. at that time. And then the Viking Age, most of the generations were during the Viking Age. And of course, the Viking Age went from approximately 800 to the year 1066. And then the next period was the High Middle Ages, and that was 1066 to 1380. And then the fifth, the Denmark, this was during the Kalmar Union, and that was from 1396 to 1523. Then chapter 6 was the union with Denmark, and that was 1523 to 1814. And then chapter 7 was the union with Sweden, and that was 1814 to 1905. And so that is when, during that last period is when Jacob and Ronald came to the US. Next slide. Then volume 3, I focused on the descendants of Jacob and Ronald. And they had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. And I tracked down all of the living and descendants of these 5. There were 6 children, but one of the children was not married, had no children. So I followed the lines down to the present day from each one of the descendants of Jacob. Okay, next slide. And then in the last volume, I focused on the people that I discovered that had remained in Norway. And there were some from Ronald's family. And so I tracked down the Borgen family that is in Lund today, and I've been to Norway and talked with them. So I put this all together. I wrote this all up, and then after I printed it out, I went. There it is. I went to Staples and had them do a spiral binding on that. And so that's the saga of this Norwegian family, Jacob and Ronald. And then I thought, well, not everyone is going to read that because it's quite long, and maybe, a lot of my family would not be willing to sit down and read it. So I did something else to make some of the content more manageable. So I created Shutterfly books. Keep the next slide. So I'm a big fan of Shutterfly. I've created a lot of photo books with photographs that I have, and I just wanted to give you some examples of what I've done. This one, I decided to create this basically for my foster cousins. So Elmer and Emma were my father's parents, so they're my grandparents, and they were both of Norwegian origin. Their grandparents, or their parents, came from Norway. So this one I focused on my grandparents and then their descendants. And then the next one, I was lucky enough to be able to attend a Borgen family reunion, and the family is in Lund, and this was in July 2012. And it just so happened that I had planned to go to Norway at that time anyway, and it just so happened that they had planned this reunion. So all of the Borgen family came to Lund. A lot of them still live in Lund. Some live in a few other places, but not too far away. So there were 50 of my relatives, my Norwegian relatives there. And it was really great for me because they were all in one place. I didn't have to travel around to see get to know all these people. So we were all in one place in Lund. And I was the only American there. They were all Norwegians there. And that was a great experience. So I took photos of everyone that was there, and I talked to everybody, interviewed everyone, got a lot of information about them. So that was a a great occasion. And the next photo book that I created, I organized a family reunion in Minneapolis in July of 2010. And so all the members of the Foster Severson family came together. And most of these people that I didn't know until I started doing my genealogy. So I really got a lot more relatives than I had before I started this. And then the last one I wanted to show you was I created a photo book on basically for my grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren, so I created 5 different books. The content is the same, but the covers are different. This was the one that went to my Claudia, who is my Italian granddaughter. And so I have 4 other ones with the photo of each one of my grandchildren. So the content is the same. It's basically their ancestral roots. So it's not only Norwegian, but also their Norwegian, Irish, German, and English roots. So this is something I knew that the kids would look at because they're short. And so that's what I've done, basically creating these narratives for the, complete narratives, all the information that I have, and then these different ones that I've created for different occasions. And that's it. Any comments, questions?
I'm curious what kind of content you put in the books for your grandkids.
What kind of content?
Yeah.
Basically, I have a few basically photos and of all their ancestors, and well, not quite all of them, but going back to the ones that I have photographs for. So it's not a lot of information, but I have photos for every one of the people that I have in the books for them.
Did you use the little pedigree sheet in Shutterbook to do
Did I
that?
use what?
There's a Shutterbook format that has like a pedigree sheet that has a family tree in it. Did you use the family tree in the Shutterfly book?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No.
Christine, how did you know how like, did you have good records of who was in the picture? I guess that's my problem. I love the idea of the books for kids or grandkids, but I have pictures, but I don't necessarily know. And I had some time before my grandmother passed away. She was 95. And so she wrote some things, but a lot of people didn't write on the back. Did people in your family write on the back? So how did you track down, or you just had good records of who was in the photos?
Oh, that's a good question. I was able to find photos of most of everyone that somebody in my family had. So
Okay.
I do have some photos that are not identified, but I didn't use those. I don't know who they are.
Right.
That's really good advice, though. If you have photos, make sure you write the names and the dates
Right.
on the back. Because there's nothing more frustrating than having a photo and you have no idea who it is.
Right. I mean, even now with my own children, I'm like, I better write this because they look the same as babies and kids. Like, let's write, that kind of thing down. So
I would have a couple of comments on that. One is use the right kind of writing instrument when you write on your photographs. I can't tell you what that is exactly, but some are not friendly to your photographs. It would be an easy Google find. And the other thing is, I've also had photographs, unidentifiable photographs. And by virtue of Ancestry that I use a lot, I run into relatives that I don't know, but they have the same pictures, and sometimes they have the information I'm looking for. And it's a matter of just making those connections. I've also sniffed out who the people in pictures were. They weren't even in my family. They were neighbors, but I found a tree out there and these people belonged in that tree. And I got a hold of the owner of that tree and said, have pictures of your grandparents. If you want them, I'll mail them to you. You know, there's no reason for me to hang on to them, but say my grandparents had those and they ended up in a shoebox.
Well, I've had two really interesting experiences. I came in touch with one of my second cousins who lives in Florida, and I went to visit her, and she pulled out a drawer of photographs. And she said, you know, I have all these photos and I don't know who these people are. And one of them I said, oh my goodness, that's my father. She had this wonderful photo of my father when he was in his early 20s. And it was just amazing. She had no idea who it was. And I go, that's my father. So we went through the photos, and I recognized a lot of people that she didn't recognize. But the most remarkable one of all was when I went to visit my second cousins out in Denver. I'd never heard of them before. And when I walked in the house, the first thing they said, do you have any idea who Edgar Foster is? And I said, yes, that's our great grandfather. And she said, well, you know, this is an interesting photo. And I had never seen him before, but in the photo, he was with his wife. And I had a picture of her, my great grandmother, but I'd never seen Edgar. And I was a picture of Edgar and his wife. And then my grandfather, it was a baptismal photograph. And it was a wonderful photo, and I loved having it. But my cousins out there had absolutely no idea who these people were.
It's, yeah, it's a little like our entire enterprise. There's a lot of connecting the dots and detective work and so forth, I think, to do some of these things. My interesting story about photographs was that I have the big book for the area where my grandfather and further back came from. And so there was a picture of the house where I knew that my great grandmother had lived, but I just thought it was from some different period or something, you know. So I was asking about it, and they said, "Oh no, that's your great grandmother sitting there in that chair next to the house." So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I used a lot of photos from the big books, is that there were a lot of good photos in there of people and houses and other places.
Christine, quick, how far back, what is the oldest relative that you are fairly sure existed? How far back does your genealogy go?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe the 1400s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
that's pretty well back, yeah.
Yeah.
The records start getting kind of murky before about 1500.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Catherine, did you have a?
Yes,
something?
I did. So almost, I mean, my parents were very recent immigrants. So literally all of my family is still in Norway. And what they have done is we have a family Facebook group. And so when someone puts up, finds a photo that they don't know, then you send it to that page, you post it up, and people start telling you who it is, and they tell you the stories. And it's been interesting because I have come up with pictures from the 1920s, 1930s that nobody had ever seen because my father was here. So I think that crowdsourcing is the most valuable lesson I've learned about old photos. I also had, so my father's, all of his aunts and uncles in one family emigrated. And it was only his father that was left behind. And so the tracking the descendants of those others who left Norway, I found that there's a group of them in Pennsylvania, and I have this photo album from 1929 until 1932 of photos in Pennsylvania, and none of them had names written on the back of them. But by doing some of the genealogy, I got myself invited to their family reunion. So I brought the photo album, and people started saying, well, that looks like so-and-so, or that looks like so-and-so. And so, you know, they took the pictures and they've identified who they are.
Very good.
I I have a few pictures that pictures of different kinds of ways of presenting this information that I've scanned. I can quickly do a couple of things if you're interested.
Joel,
Yeah.
just one comment on saving photographs and labeling them. That's sort of my job right now because I inherited a lot of family pictures and I know who they are, but nobody else does because my mother told me. And so what I've done is rather than write on the actual photograph, since many of them are more than 100 years old, I've scanned them, printed them, and I'm writing on the prints.
Oh,
And so it's a little bit more work, but at least then my thought was to then take the photographs themselves and donate them to NAHA, down the road.
sure. And having them scanned is another way, to send them around to people that might know who's in the picture that you can get some more information from.
Well, also I should mention one of the advantages of Shutterfly books is that anyone can go to the site. You can give the link to anyone and then they can go in if they want to buy the book, they can. So it's a good way of letting other people get it.
Oh, that's good.
How physically, how big was that book that, like for your grandkids?
Well, I couldn't hear you.
I'm thinking about the book that you created for your grandkids. Was that a 8.5 by 11 sized book, or was that a tiny 5 by 7 thing, or what was that?
Well, you want to know what size it was?
The cover, say, was it like a 5
Well,
by
you-
7 photograph?
Yeah, they're hardcover books, and well, I can send you the link if you want to look at them because anyone can go in there and look at them.
I was just wondering when it's printed and somebody has it in their hand, how big is that thing?
Oh
I
gosh,
think-
I can. It's just like a regular sized book for children. It's a small book. And I basically have well, I have the photos and also the information.
So it's smaller
But
than a sheet of
they're
paper.
but with Shutterfly, they're different. They're different sizes. You can choose different sizes. I think mine were maybe 8 by 8, something like that. I can't
Oh,
remember.
okay.
But I think they have about 5 different sizes. So you can decide what size you want it to be.
Okay. Thanks.
I did one that was 8.5 by 11 and had it printed in the paperback and then gave them as gifts at Christmas to my various cousins from my Norwegian family. So it was fairly affordable and it got the job done in terms of sharing the photographs and getting them labeled. I mean, I knew who everybody was, but it got it out there. I've also had really, really good luck with Facebook groups. I don't have one for my Norwegian family, but I do for my husband's family and the other half of mine, and have, through the pandemic, had wonderful experiences getting photos identified and finding more photos.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good way of sharing what you've done.
Yeah. And I know the University of Illinois, their librarian over the pandemic, I'd have to go look for the link, did a seminar on preserving artifacts. Mostly it was an archivist, so it was mostly our paper artifacts, but she also talked about photographs as well. I've got mine I've scanned them and then I have them in sleeves, stable sleeves, and because I have a collection of negatives too that I did. Then I've got a lot of stuff I've been collecting for many, many years. But I've part of the time that I've been locked down, I've been stabilizing photographs.
Yeah, I will say that every time I go into Ancestry and look around, I keep stumbling over Lisa. She's got a lot of great material in there.
Well, I've gone the other direction. I get very scared when I get right up to Norway, so I quit.
Did someone say that it sounded like there was a repository maybe at NAHA for photographs. I don't know anything about that.
Naha does have archives, and because my family's right from around there and was very involved in St. Olaf, I was able to find a lot of family things there. But they do have a really wonderful archives, as does St. Olaf. And actually, you can go online and they have a list. I found some family members of some of, they've got letters, people have donated family histories, people have donated photographs. I found a photo album of my great aunt, you know, from the 1890s to 19 whatever. So they have wonderful things, both and Naha and St. Olaf sort of work in conjunction with one another. But they're very great. They're glad, I think, to take archival materials. And I thought probably that, to me, it seemed like it would be a better place for more people to get them than just keep them in my closet.
We, just to plug for a future meeting in July, we will have Crystal Benson, who was formerly the archivist at NAHA and is now the archivist at St. Olaf. And then subsequently we'll have, I think probably the current NAHA archivist, together with the president or the leader of NAHA.
I stopped by there once, and apparently you need sort of an appointment
Right.
for someone to show up.
I think you do right now because of the virus.
No, even before
You
then.
needed it before. You needed it before because they I guess a lot of people just sort of come in and they, like I had a day set aside to work there, and they brought things out. So it was, you can't go in. They have to bring the things out. And so I guess that's why.
How do you, they have some kind of online index so you know what you're asking for, or?
They had an online index. It's not complete, but that got me started. And because I have a lot of pastors in that area, a lot, you know, grandparents that were pastors and so on, there's a lot of their church materials as well in there. So I was able to like say, all right, New Richland, you know, do you have materials on churches in New Richland and you know, the Melbys? And so they were able to, I wrote ahead and let them know the areas I was interested in. And they were able to tell me, you know.
Do they concentrate on that area of Minnesota, or is it?
No, it's because my family was very involved in the beginnings of St. Olaf. And so that's why they have a lot of those St. Olaf folks, but they have a lot of other, you know, a lot of the Lutheran, early Lutheran church materials too, from, you know, the 1840s on up.
Okay.
One other place that I think is a good reason. It's not as big as some of the other places around. Is it North Dakota? I think that has a huge collection of material.
Yeah, UND in Grand Forks.
And the University of Wisconsin also has a huge collection. But I like the Norwegian American Genealogical Center and Naiseth Library. They have a huge collection. They have a good collection of bigger books. I've found most of the ones I'm looking for there, but they also have a huge collection of family histories. One of my experiences was that I was contacted by somebody in our Holverstein family line, and she said, "Oh, I looked you up in the Blue Book." So I said, "What's the Blue Book?" And well, it turned out that this library in Madison had a copy of it, so I was able to get it and scan a few of the pages. One of the things that Christine was doing that I like, and I'd like to one of the things I want to do to see if I can do a better job with our family story is to put it into the historical context, to talk both on the larger scale, talk about what's happening in the world or in Norway at the time that for each generation, for the people that you're talking about, but also what their lives are like. What can we say about what was going on more locally as well as more broadly? And I'd be especially interested in ways of doing that. I know that, and in fact, Alan sent me a copy of one called "What's Next?" The memoir of a Norwegian Iowan, which was very interesting because it talked about a lot of the places where I grew up. I think most of you have seen the presentation by Paul Arneson about the book he did on "I Couldn't Milk Another Goat," which is, I think, it's interesting because of the way he kind of wove together different stories, different things about his family, but also different things about the community and some links to additional information and so forth.
You grew up north of me then? Because I grew up in Ames.
Well, I actually grew up in Council Bluff.
Okay. Okay.
But the center of the family was really southwestern Minnesota, Jasper, Sioux Falls kind of area.
And my family is from Monona County. That's close by.
Yeah, I think somehow just about everybody with Norwegian ancestry had to go to the Midwest for some period of time.
Not me. That's what I was just gonna say. There are some things in New York too, where they've recorded people's like stories, and you can read them online. And maybe if you are from the Norwegian Americans that didn't go out to the Midwest and stayed in New York and said that's good enough. There are some, but I'll try to find what that resource was. I was reading some story. They weren't my family, but they were very interesting stories where they went out and asked people, please write this all down because you're getting older. Please write some of this stuff down. And it was really interesting, but I'll try to find what that resource was in the New York area.
It seems, aside from the Midwest and farming, there was a New York pocket, and then there's the Seattle pocket, which was heavy fishing related from what I've gleaned so far. If anybody's ever watched The Deadliest Catch on TV years ago, Sig Hansen, I think is his name. He wrote a book that I kind of ran across by accident, and his family comes from Rogaland. And in the book, it's not so much, it's a little bit about his professional fishing career, but there's a lot of his family history that goes back to Norway that turns it interesting and includes his growing up speaking Norwegian in Seattle and the neighborhoods. And if you've ever been there, it's way more fun to read a book where you've been there and you know those street names and you know those landmarks and things like that. It's kind of fun.
I had a question on just if you're not going to write a big book and you're just recording in, say, Ancestry.com, do other people, I don't do it that much, but I think it would be useful when we're talking about people looking at things and maybe continuing on your research or just knowing, but using the little boxes for writing things. I've tried to do that. And the reason why is because there's a lot of people that are in Ancestry that, I mean, I'm an amateur genealogist, but they're really just picking and choosing, and they might not be right. And then a lot of times if I write to them, I find out that they are not even related. It's somebody in their town, or it's the brother's cousin's blood. They're interested in it. It's one of the things they're doing, and they make mislinks. So two things I try to do is make sure I put all my resources there, because sometimes they don't. They just go, I'm sure that's the same, you know, Marie and Tobias, and it's not. It's another one in, you know, in Brooklyn that wasn't in the Bronx. But the other thing is to try to take stories from your relatives and just include it in there. Like I said, it would be better to write a big personal narrative, but if you're not going to do that, I try to put that in the blocks. Like somebody would say, well, they died of this, and then you know, so on and so forth. So I try to use those blocks to explain a little bit more, because I think something like Ancestry, there's a lot of room for like misdirection, and sometimes people are looking for my family and they are not related, and I'm fine with that if they want to. And I get nervous too when they take mine and make it gospel, and I'm like, wait, that this is just for me, and I try to make sure it's right, but please look at the sources yourself, look at the notes. Like that could be not correct. But you know, I guess that's the risk of a public like a public tree. But I guess that's my point, is maybe use the blocks to flesh it out with stories you heard, like say from my grandmother or other people I contact and say, I heard from my grandmother that this person died heart attack in their sleep, and they'll say, yep, that's right. And then I'll put it in the block, because I think over time that gets lost and people will just see all these misconnections, and I don't know. I just feel that's a way to clarify. It's not a full-blown personal narrative, but at least it's something more than just linking records. I don't know. That was just my point.
And similar, well, first of all, there are a lot of incorrect trees out there, and I don't try to be the tree police, because that's a losing battle. You could be there forever trying to do that. You can only do the best you can on your own. But in the top in Ancestry, you can, look across the top horizontal, there are notes and there are comments. And you can write a comment about that person's profile. And for example, what I've done is said, I can't say for sure that this is the correct person, but this is why I believe it is, and blah, blah, blah. And then you can go back and edit that over time in case something new comes up. And I leave kind of that paper trail for people. So if they want to read the comment, they can follow along with why I have them there. But on the other hand, next to that, there are notes. And notes are something for that no one else, public cannot see. So you can keep track of things on your own in the notes. And you know, if you have thousands of people in there, you're not going to remember all this stuff. So the notes kind of can come in handy for your own benefit, but that's not public information.
That's good.
I just found a lot of people didn't have anybody. I mean, that's not their fault, but they didn't have anybody left. And I don't know either, but when I was doing it, I did have my grandmother, so I could bounce a lot of things off. And sometimes I find people that we match up information, but a lot of people are out there guessing, and they'll say, I don't have anybody to ask. And I'm like, okay. So hopefully, like, yeah, I agree with that. Put the notes and see that. And a lot of times I'll try to write it to show, like, I am not certain, but I think, so that they'll know, hey, maybe don't take this or do more research. But anyways.
I mean, yeah, I think that's really good, because it does go to that question of, we're not going to be around forever for somebody to ask these questions either, you know. So if you put some of that stuff in there, that's great. I will say that a good part of the effort I've put in over the last couple of years has been to straighten out some of the stories I got from my mother, which were sort of right, but weren't really right, and I had to track some things down.
Well, one thing, my wife did some genealogy, and her grandfather did a lot of inventions. And the family story was they had over 100 patents. And my wife did the research. He had 11 patents. So that was a little generous, but on the other hand, 11 patents, considering that some of them were significant things like the telephone dial, was pretty impressive, you know.
Yeah.
So it wasn't bad, but they just kept on going a little bit.
My mother told us how my grandfather had, I think, a restaurant and a grocery store at about the time that he died. And I went back and checked it, and finally it turned out to be that he started out with a restaurant and then moved to another town and started a grocery store and moved to another, you know, so it, I think I finally figured the whole thing out.
What about too, where the records, like census or something, that I'm not sure how to explain it, but sometimes people start going, oh well, it said this, I'm totally sure, but I think things like Ancestry, or I don't know, genealogy clubs should say, just like we talk about farm names, and hey, remember there's farm names, and there's like some of the people just look at a record and go, I'm sure that's it. I'm sure that they were, for example, in my family, I'm sure they were Austrian. It's like, no, because this was not my Norwegian relatives, but things changed over time and they just wrote it down. They're like, you know, and English might have been a problem. Or like my great uncle, they're like, yeah, that was Sigrid. Like, no, he's not a girl. So they were just writing stuff down. They came for the census. Maybe the English wasn't so great. The kids were at school and they start writing down, yeah, Sigrid. Like, okay, he's a boy. It wasn't Sigrid. But I know that from looking, but maybe, you know, some people I meet that do genealogy, they're sure just because they saw it that way. And I'm like, well, you really have to do a little bit more to realize that mistakes are made. It's not just because it's some official census document doesn't mean that stuff is totally free of error either. So I guess writing that in a narrative or writing that in those side blocks, like, hey, it said this, but that was actually a mistake. You know, his name was Sig, but not Sigrid. He's a guy. So, I mean, I guess stuff like that, people come after you and they're like, no, it said it's official document, you know, from the US government. It's correct. Like, well, okay. They're not perfect.
It's only as good as the guy that, or the gal, or whoever the census taker was.
Right.
You know, they didn't always have great handwriting. They didn't always have great spelling skills. They didn't, sometimes they just pencil whipped the columns and they got things totally wrong. I've never had anybody in my family from Germany, and yet, you know, occasionally something will get, but if you have like 3 census in a row, well, then you can kind of get a pretty good consensus of what's going on. Or, you know, if you can triangulate a person, well, then you can put it together.
Right.
One bit of information is just but one bit of information.
Jill, you were going to show us some other ideas of putting our materials together.
I can do a couple things quickly. Let me see. Well, yeah. Let me share the screen, and I'll show a couple of things quickly. Where's my thing here? Come on. So this wasn't where I was planning to go, but this is that blue book I was talking about. So the Helverstein family got together and tracked down as much information as they could, and so this is a fairly straightforward, simple way to do it, and you can enhance things with individual stories. That's always good. This one, Actually, there are a couple of relatives over here, but it was just kind of an interesting way to put together the family tree. This was apparently done for these people in the middle, I think probably an anniversary or something. And then they built as many pictures as they could into the thing. And so it's a little hard to look at, but it's kind of a remarkable exercise, I think. One of the more interesting ones that I found, this was, I was looking at Family Search, and there was this little paragraph that talked about this book, The Ostergaard and Stuhlen Families in America. And it was supposed to be in the library there, but I couldn't get it. So I did what I always do. I started Googling around, and I discovered that the Nebraska State Genealogical Society had a copy of it. This is kind of a combination of a lot like what Christine was showing us. He put together some information about old families in Norway, and then traced a few families. He made extensive use of another family story that was done by a relative named Arne Stuhlen in Norway. But one of the interesting things about this one is that he did do references, which was a good thing. But then it looks like he only did about 25 copies of it, and so it's kind of a rare thing to be able to find it. He had a very limited distribution list. One thing that's fairly common is to do something about the family on different anniversaries. This was the one that actually got me started doing this. Although I was 4 years old at the time, but going back, they put in a nice family tree that was a great starting point. This takes you back to about 1600. The Hoverstein side of the family originally did one in 1952, which I had a copy of before that blue book. This was also really helpful in getting started. So this is one section of it. It has a picture of the family. This is my great grandfather's family, and at that time, my mother and father were in Sioux Falls, and they had one son, which of course was me. So let's go back. So I mean, I think everybody has an idea of what they could do. I think going back to Bill DeRoche in our webpage, I think one way to go about trying to put something like this together is to go for smaller things. Start out with stories about your grandfather. Maybe stories of if you're pretty sure that there was a Viking back there, do a story about that, and perhaps we could keep those some of those on the website that Bill is putting together. And I think there was a section for this kind of stuff. Bill, you may be muted, Bill.
Yeah, I'd like to put in a section for family genealogies and anything people would like to share.
Has anybody made a website, a family genealogy website for their own personal family?
My wife did, yeah, but it's not Norwegian, but my wife did a personal website. She did that actually 20 years ago. So that's people have done websites, and this is it's still up. And some people, she's found a lot of relatives through it.
Oh, and so she made it public.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of doing more of a private one, and I started working on it, but I didn't, because of the privacy issues and all that, I was kind of hesitant to make it public, but.
That's, yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because then you can use links and things so that people can navigate through it more easily than necessarily just sitting with a big paper tome.
Yeah, my wife handles the privacy by not putting the names of any living people on her website without their permission. So she does handles that privacy issue that way. And honestly, she's not had any problems with it, and not that many people are interested because it's a fairly unusual name.
I did a family Facebook group that's just private to our family.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I remember when we first started the genealogy group many years ago, I created a wiki. I don't know if you remember what a wiki was. That was quite a while ago. But we had a password for that, and no one else could access it if you didn't have the password.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking at. Now you can do it through WordPress, kind of like a big blog, but I have, different pages. I just have, each generation gets a page, and then they can download a family group chart on each generation page, so that if the people in my family who are interested in that can kind of download and print out their own, and it saves me from having to kind of share the whole tree with everybody. But and then a special section for different kind of unusual stories in the family history that I've stumbled on.
Yeah, we had the histories of several of our lodge members, but that was quite a while ago. Maybe Rick and Joel remember that. A lot of people didn't like that idea because they were afraid of putting things on the web. And even though we had a password, a lot of people just didn't like the idea. So it sort of fell into, it disappeared. It might still be out there somewhere. Rick and Joel, do you remember that?
I remember it, yeah.
How many years ago was that?
It was when
20.
I was first starting, so it was a good 10, 12 years ago, I think.
It's almost a separate topic. Pitfalls of like a public tree or a public site on Ancestry, or working on like WikiTree or on Family Search, or I'm really tempted by the blog idea in WordPress, but then I don't know if my family, like with a bound genealogical book, I don't know if my family would ever look at it or ever go to my blog, where with Facebook, it kind of comes up in front of them. Sometimes they're interested, sometimes they're not. But yeah, there are pitfalls to being public with your genealogy. It's not something it's something I definitely have fallen into some, but would like to know more about and how to deal with them, because there are crazy people on Ancestry. Yeah, I mean, but she talks about adding more pieces to it and helping to document. That's great when you're dealing with rational people, but there are people who take your pictures and put them on, let's say, find a grave for a totally different relative, and now, or even a non-relative, and now what do you do, or how do you police it? There is one part of my Norwegian family that has a very hard time comprehending that farm names don't necessarily mean we're related to each other in Norway, and are adamant that people are related to each other because they have the same last name now that they're in the United States. And you're like, oh. And they can be very toxic. Yeah.
So,
Thank
yeah,
you for that, because I didn't think of that part where now you're adding more information. So that's fueling, like, they could just take that and say, oh yeah, that's part of our history too. So I didn't think of that part. So thanks for that.
A large tree, which I made as a complete novice, which I wouldn't recommend ever going about it the way it is now. And I tried to tie down everybody who is in it using at least some census data so that everybody was a real person linked to a real document. But other than that, you know, I've uploaded a lot of photos because I wanted to share photos, but I've seen them used in ways that I'm not comfortable with. I do get contacted by people who put up for adoption to the point that they've made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, I found too, like, I kind of fell into this a little bit, and then I realized at first I thought it was a language thing, and then I learned Danish, and so I knew she could understand what I was writing because she can understand, I'm sure, Bokmål, but there's a lady that is really into genealogy. She's married to a Norwegian. It's very useful, but she does not want to share unless you're going to give her. So then she started wanting to get information about not for really nefarious. She's not trying to steal my credit card number, but she wanted a bunch of information about my grandfather who's just married into the Norwegian. And I sort of was like, wait. If this is about documenting people from Oslo, and she has done that. And I come across where she's gone and find a grave, and if there's a flower, I know that's Els to Vate. I know it. She's tracked all these people down, so it is useful, but it's a tit. It's sort of I don't even call it tit for tat. She does not want to give you anything unless you give her some of your stuff, but it's not related to your Norwegian relatives. So you're kind of like, what are you playing at? And she wants you to, this is password, you got to guess. And I don't know what this woman. So yeah, I get it. There can be people on there that you're like, okay, this is getting too much.
You know, discussion. I don't know if there are people that have even more experience or know how to. I know a lot of it no longer bothers me, but I definitely talk to other genealogists in my family that won't even participate on Facebook, won't share their material until you're really well vetted.
Right.
Maybe that makes me wonder. I make my tree private. I have a note there because I think it's better than a lot of the ones that went before. I don't think it's perfect, but I tried. You know, some of them I feel like they didn't even try. They got on for their free trial and like them to go.
Yeah. I just got a little concerned when it was like, I gave information, I gave pictures, which she quickly added to her list of people from Oslo. And even my own child was in that picture. And then it started getting where she wanted information and they weren't Norwegians. They were married in. And I thought, I don't know why, but you know, I think she's addicted. Maybe she's just addicted to making the biggest tree ever in the world of Norwegian people. But you know, I don't know.
I believe that the Mormon church, there's a need to, or a desire to go back, even if the people are dead, to make sure that they were married into the Mormon church so they could be together in heaven. That might be a myth though.
It's not. It's not. I grew up in a Mormon community, and literally any business that you go into, you know, and I'd been away for 20 years, and I go to the golf course, and you know, there's Adele Taylor, and Adele says, now who are your people? And I tell her who my father was, and she says, oh yes, I remember. She pulls out a book and opens to my parents and me, and she also is able to tell me when and who baptized him into the LDS church. To which I said, well, glad you did. I'm sure it'll help, but we were staunch Lutherans and we still are. And we believe that, you know, one baptism was all that we really needed, but thank you.
The Mormons for keeping track of it. Sometimes it makes you a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
have a question for this group. I've done my genealogy years ago, 20 years ago, and have, now that I'm looking at retirement projects, I thought, well, it's time to just really upgrade that and do it all over again. And so I need to choose a software program, and my sister-in-law, who is a professional genealogist, recommends something called iFamily, which is an obscure product out of Australia, but it is serviced. It is Mac accessible. But I'm curious, if other people have used, if you use Family Tree Maker, if you just rely on Ancestry, if there are other software programs that you particularly like and what you particularly like about them. If anybody has any comments, or if you want to just email me directly, I would appreciate any feedback.
That would actually be, I think, a good topic for a meeting. If we could, people that have had experience with different programs to tell us about it. My own, I use Ancestry, but I came to not trust Ancestry when they had their big upgrade, and I lost some information and found people linked to the wrong places, and it took me a while to straighten it out. So I do use Family Tree Maker, which links to Ancestry, and then I know I have a copy on my computer, and I can control it. Other people?
I use
I
Roots
use Family
Magic.
Tree Maker.
Yeah, Roots Magic is good.
Roots Magic, and that also links into whatever you want to link into, Ancestry or Family Search, Family Tree.
Use Legacy. I used to use Family Tree Maker until they had a period when the two of them weren't working together, and I switched to Legacy and haven't switched back. But I definitely have something outside of Ancestry.
Yeah. That maybe the other ones are like this. In Family Tree Maker, they do some kind of a test of how stable things are at Ancestry before they let you sync, which is, I think, probably a good idea.
I bought Family Tree Maker, but I find that more than anything, I like solving the mysteries. So I'm spending my time on Ancestry and MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA, trying to solve the mysteries of life rather than document or publish them. Yeah. I'm horrible at the documentation thing, but like Joel said, I do upload a copy every now and then from Ancestry, so it's mine.
Yeah, I'm horrible. I did genealogy just for myself until the pandemic, and then just forced myself to sit down and try to share with other people what I had. But yeah, I like to solve the mystery.
We've had two things come up that the next email I send out, I'm going to ask two things. One is, what books do you have, and are you willing to serve as a lookup? We're not going to be mailing books around the country, but if you'd be willing to look somebody up for one of our colleagues. And two, I'm going to ask what software you're familiar with and that you use. And maybe we can put together a meeting where we can kind of compare all the different programs that are out there, because there's a number of them now. And I think we're always looking for a better one.
Joel, can I just, I'm sorry, I stay muted because I love all this stuff, but I have to go back to, I don't remember her name, and I'm so sorry, but you mentioned all the people that ancestries that go Midwest, Idaho, or Minnesota, blah, blah, blah. But she also mentioned there is a New York contingency. And that's where my whole family ended up. They ended up in Buffalo. They came in through Erie and Ontario. And she said that there was a link, and I missed that. And I'm so sorry. But yeah, because I'm going crazy trying to find how the heck my dad got in here. So if there is, because my whole family settled in Buffalo, New York. So if there is a link, if she could give that to me or something, because that would be very helpful. And I'm sorry I missed that. Thank you very much.
That was me, and I'll have to go find what I was reading that from.
Yes, it was
Un-
you. It was
Yeah,
you. too.
unfortunately, it might be New York City, but I will try my
Oh,
best.
no. Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
send
No,
that to
it's
everybody.
Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York. They came in through the Canada border.
Yeah, and I think we talked before, I had somebody in my family that was doing that during the war because of Little Norway up in Canada, but I will try to find the thing, but like I said, that might just be New York City stories, but
Okay, right.
I'll look
There's something,
into that.
Well,
there's
I
something
know
called
some
the
of them
Norwegian
came in-
Immigration Association.
some
Norwegian
came in through
Norwegian
Ellis
Immigration
Island.
Association.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What?
There's something called the Norwegian Immigration Association.
Norwegian Immigration.
Association, NIA, and they, for a while, they were heavily focused on people who came in through Canada and people who came in through New York.
Oh.
And then also the Sjömanskyrka in Brooklyn, they also still have some records, and the there's also there was a Norwegian Methodist congregation in Brooklyn. That
And I
still some records
actually
available.
I traced because my parents were married in Brooklyn, and I traced it back and I found the church. I did go back to that, but I don't know how my dad got here. I know my mom came through Ellis Island. I have no idea how my dad came. The last I have his green card, he's coming through Canada and then my grandfather, same thing, brought an aunt. I have my aunt was here in New York, Buffalo, but there's no recollection if he died in Canada. But I just thought when you said New York, my lights went off. So, all right, I will look into this. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, before we all start having Zoom fatigue, let's see if there are any last comments. And remember our meeting in April. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear from these guys trying to teach this class across the Atlantic.
I was curious about and had her genealogy ordered by historic period. I remember you saying that most of your sources were online. I've been thinking that what I have to do next is understand as much as I can about Norwegian history before I try to, I cover a book called The Bridge. I go right up to the bridge, but then I stop at like the border in understanding my family. And I wondered if there were any particularly good sources for Norwegian history, both mythological history as well as something you could.
I'm gonna let Bill DeRoche jump in here. He started something called the Norwegian History Roundtable, which you might find interesting.
Yeah, we have the Norwegian History Roundtable, and we meet every month. And this coming month, we're going to have a talk on Norway and the merchant Norway's contribution to the war in the Atlantic, particularly people who talk about their father's experience in the merchant marine during the war. And the lodge meetings we're going to have coming up in April, we're going to have a person from the Nordic Museum talk about the immigration experience. This is the lodge meeting, immigration experience in terms of the Scandinavian experience. This is he did a whole exhibit on the Scandinavian experience for the Nordic Museum, and he's going to put the immigration to the United States in that context. May, we're going to be having a talk. A woman's going to talk about her family's participation in Norwegian resistance. And in June, we'll have a talk that's especially applicable to genealogy. A person is going to talk about the ship, the Restoration, which was referred to as Norway's Mayflower. This is some of the first immigrants from Norway to the United States came over on the Restoration. And Dale Goodman is going to give the talk, and he had 4 relatives on that ship, so he has a strong personal connection to that. So we're going to have a lot of stuff with that. And are you a member of the lodge?
No, I'm in Normal, Illinois. I didn't have a lodge near me when I looked. Do I join your lodge then?
Well, if you want to, but I mean, if you send me your email, and this is programs at norwaydc.org. I'll put that on the chat here. And
if you like, Lisa, I'll be happy to
and
pass
just
your
send me
email on to. It's not required that you be a member of the Sons of Norway. You can get the. Although we'd appreciate it if you wanted to join.
I just didn't know how. Once I got onto the site and looked at it, and I realized, I guess maybe my local lodge would be in Chicago.
Yeah, well, if you could, we have people from the state of Washington who join our lodge because we do a lot of Zoom stuff. That is the information. I'll put you on the mailing list. And as Joel said, we certainly encourage you to join the lodge, but but you can check us out and see how things are without joining the lodge.
Yeah. Can you get me the link, Joel? What I need? Or should
Sure.
I'm worried? I'm not very good with Zoom. I hate to admit that. I can get the chat, but will chat go away when we log off?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I live in Minnesota, and I just joined the DC Lodge recently. It wasn't a difficult thing to do just by going to their website.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you the website, and I'll ask to have your email put on the general mailing list. I've got you on my genealogy mailing list, but we'll put you on the regular mailing list. You can see what these programs are. We're really hoping that we can get back to meeting in person at the lodge soon. But even when we do, we'll continue to have Zoom. Now I know it's kind of a long drive from Illinois to Alexandria, Virginia.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to have Zoom. Yes.
I'm not moving again. It's just not.
Yeah.
My genealogy stuff was packed up for 2 years in storage. It was sad.
I wonder too, I mean, this is just throwing something out there when we talked about Norwegian history, but I wonder if people can join like a class that's on Zoom or something, with the, Corona. It's a lot of bad things, but like I was able to join a class. I go Monday and Wednesdays to a class in Aarhus, Denmark to learn Danish. And then I talk with people on Thursdays that are in Copenhagen. And so that's like something I never would have thought would happen. And it cost me, I could go free once a week. I paid $21 a month to do that. And I sit in my house and I can do it. And I just wondered if there's maybe some of the Norwegian universities have something where if you're interested and they have stuff online, you can join by Zoom or whatever platform they're using, Whereby, AirMeet, whatever they use. An opportunity that I wouldn't have thought of before, but like my thing is I think in connection with Aarhus University or something, but I don't know, just throwing that out there. I haven't looked into it, but if there's Norwegian history courses and the people from all around the world could join it, that would be cool, I think.
I just ordered a book off of Amazon to get started, and we've been watching some movies. We watched, what was it? The one about the resistance with that they sent the 12 guys and there was only the one survivor. We watched that.
Yeah, 12th man. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of
There's a lot
classes on
there,
Roots Tech.
This is awesome. Oh my God, this is awesome. Are there, like what you're talking about, going on Zoom to learn about Norway? And my other family's from Denmark, but Norway, I like the language, and I'm just like what you're talking about. Is there something that you could do Zoom 3 days a week, 1 day a week? Oh my God, that would be awesome.
Probably. Like I never thought, and I'm like sitting in my house
So
talking to
excited.
Russian, speaking Danish from Denmark, or getting a Danish teacher and I'm just sitting in my house. So, I mean, there's got to be stuff from
Brothers
Norway.
Denmark. I'm like, I'm so excited. How do I get onto that? How do I
Right.
do that?
This
Mine-
is like in the same category, but NTNU, Norwegian Technical something University, NTNU.
NK,
No, NT.
sorry, NK. Say it again. I'm sorry.
TNU.
NU. Okay.
They have a really nice thing for learning the language. It's it's completely self-driven, but they have chapters you go through, and they
This is awesome.
when they speak, that you can have two choices. Either they'll do it slow or fast, so you can start out learning.
I'm slow. NTNU. Oh, thank you. This is awesome.
I'm
What's this?
new to-
What's her name? Christine from New York. What was the school in Denmark?
So I'm they only have Danish, but this is just more of a language thing. But the school there, I think it's within Aarhus University, but this is a company by two little crazy Danish guys that put this company together. And I think they were hoping everyone would meet up and learn languages in Denmark, but then coronavirus. So they have online lessons where it's a webinar. Like they people are in the chat and they'll say, Christine asked this about this, they got a little helper. So yeah, I think that's called swaplanguages.com, but that you'd have to be interested in Spanish or Danish. But I just meant, like, was there a history class on Norwegian history, probably in English from Norway? Because I mean, I looked into a bunch of summer seminar stuff in Norway. Like, I don't know if that's going to go on in this summer or next summer, but that a lot of that stuff was in English. So I didn't know if they were going to put that stuff on Zoom about, the history of Norway. I just felt like, I can't remember what university that was in Norway, but I looked it up. I think it's one that Sons of Norway magazine talks about, but I just think if nobody's going to be coming there, that stuff would be online and we could join it about Norwegian history or something like that.
Is there any chance, I know this sounds crazy. I had a trip from last year for Norway booked to this year, July. Am I wasting my time? Am I want to go so bad again, but any word on opening or no?
Well, here
Anybody heard anything?
Well, here's what I heard, that the Disney Magic, which is how I do anything in Scandinavia, but is quite a cruise ship because I have children. But anyways, their whole, I just heard, is canceled for the summer. So the Magic, that's the boat's name, is not going to do anything in Europe. So I'm not saying I know anything more than that. I just know that normally I would go out of Denmark to go to Norway or to go to Iceland or any of that. It's not happening. So they're not doing anything till fall 2021. So I don't know about other things, but I don't know. I was looking, I keep talking about Denmark, so sorry about that. But I was looking up this art place in Copenhagen, and it was saying it was reopening on the 21st. I don't know what that means. That's for people that are there, that are able to get there, but I don't know what that means, but that was my only feedback I have on that.
Thank you. Yeah, my trip was Finland up to Lapland and down coastal Norway to Sweden. But okay, I guess I'll have to think about next year. Thank you. Oh, it's so upsetting to me. I want to do this so bad. But thank you.
I have a question about, do we have a roster of lodge members? Every so often, somebody says something and there's a name connected to them, but I don't have any lodge member roster so I can contact people.
I,
Yeah, we used to have a lodge roster. And I guess with everything, we haven't published that in a couple of years. You know, I'll check to see if there's any interest in publishing another one or providing it online. So yeah, that's a good question. I'll bring that up with the board.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, has anybody had any experience in finding out whether your relatives served in the military in Norwegian at any time?
there are, I haven't looked at them, but there are some online resources in the digital archives, I think, that talk about some of that kind of stuff. We can, I'll take a look and see what's there, and I can send you that link.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I use those cards, the getting into that might be a unique situation. So my great uncle was in the Norwegian military, but they were, you know, the Norwegian Air Force was in Canada. So because he lived in New York, he came home to visit sometimes, and so did his cousin who was from Norway. They joined together. So I used that and used the address in New York City to go, oh, that's him. And oh, and that's his cousin. And so, and who they visited, I matched up the street address. So I knew that was them, but that wasn't very good military records per se. I mean, it was like the military, they were saying who their commanding unit was because they had to tell the immigration people, why are you coming back in the United States during the war? Oh, because I'm in the military. This is my commander's name at Little Norway. And I'm visiting my mom or my aunt, in the case of the cousin, at this address in New York City. So that's kind of how, the only way I could piece it together. And I know the lodge had a book on Little Norway for the Norwegian Air Force folks up there, but it was that more of a picture book. It was interesting, but it's not really records per se.
And then the other thing I wanted to know is, was anything ever published after the war? When we were over in Norway, we were showing 3 graves, and we said these were 3 resistance in the you know, they were in the resistance. Is there anything that tells you what they did in the resistance if you have the names?
Interesting.
I think there's a very important resistance museum in
Yeah.
Norway. I
Yeah.
can't remember which city it's in.
I think there's several. There's the main one in Oslo, and you can contact them, and I'm sure they would be helpful. You can get that online, the Resistance Museum. And there's been a number of histories involved in that.
I'm just wondering, with your group here, I'm kind of new to it still, so I was
I
just,
have to go, sorry.
oh, okay.
Yeah. No, just, thank you, bye.
Okay. Do you ever like kind of get together, like you said, several people mentioned mysteries, you know, they like to solve the mysteries. And I'm working on one right now in my family tree that has got me really stumped. But anyway, and I was wondering if you ever kind of just throw things out at a meeting and, you know, kind of help each other to maybe get through one of these brick walls.
That's definitely something that we've talked about, and I mean, even now with Zoom, one of the things we could do if we have people who are trying to solve some of these problems and other people who have good experience doing this stuff, we can go into these breakout rooms and people can work together. Send me an email. Either way, if you feel like if you have these kinds of questions you're trying to solve, and or you'd like to be able to help people work through these problems, and I can try to set up some kind of a meeting to do that kind of stuff.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So that's the third thing I'll add to the next email I send out, is if you're willing to do these kinds of things.
Hey, I don't know if this helps anybody, but there's a bunch of links on our chat so far for the whole meeting. And I just did a copy paste the entire chat thing rather than write anything down. And then I copy pasted it in an email to myself while we're doing this, and might save you some heartache.
Yeah. There, I'm recording the meeting, and it may be that I end up with a copy of the chat out of that too. So I'll take a look at that and see. It seems to me that there is some way to preserve the chat. I'll try to do that. Okay, I think Zoom fatigue is setting in.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you
Yeah,
all.
thank you, Joe.
Look forward to seeing you in a month or so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Nice to see you, Lisa.
Have a good weekend, everyone, and stay safe.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Good to see you too,
Bye,
Al.
hi, Reese's.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.